In the frozen heart of Montana, winter has a way of swallowing sound. The trees stand motionless, their branches heavy with snow, the rivers slow to a whisper beneath sheets of ice. And in the midst of all that silence, lives a man who has spent most of his life running from himself. Walter Jensen, 63 years old, moves through the snow like a shadow. His boots crunch on the frozen ground, the weight of each step pressing years of solitude into the earth. The people in town call him the ghost on the mountain, a name earned not just for the way he disappears into the woods, but for the look in his eyes, hollow, quiet. A man haunted, though no one quite knows by what. His cabin perches at the edge of the forest, a small wooden structure weathered by decades of wind and snow. Inside, the walls are lined with the trophies of a life spent hunting. Antlers, pelts, faded black and white photographs of a younger Walter, rifle slung over his shoulder, smile faintly visible beneath a thick beard. But the cabin is silent now, save for the crackle of a dying fire. That morning, as dawn broke pale and cold across the horizon, Walter set out as he had countless times before. Rifle slung across his back, breath curling in the frigid air. But something was different. Halfway down a ridge near the frozen Bitterroot River, he saw it, a streak of gray in the snow. At first it looked like just another casualty of the wild, a wolf caught in a hunter's snare, body trembling, eyes wide with terror. Walter had seen this 100 times. Normally, he would have raised the rifle without a second thought. But that morning, he hesitated. He knelt beside the animal, his weathered hands reaching toward the steel jaws clamped tight around its leg. The wolf snarled, teeth bared, but its strength was fading fast. Walter felt his heart pound in his chest, not from fear, but from something else. Something long buried. What makes a man change? Not overnight, not by force, but in the smallest of moments. When the world turns quiet and you're left alone with a choice. The snow fell heavier. Walter's fingers trembled on the trap. He could end it, walk away as he always had, or he could save it. The thing about moments that change your life is, they don't announce themselves. They slip in quietly, almost unnoticed. A choice made in the cold, a trembling hand on steel, a flicker of mercy where once there was only survival. Walter Jensen exhaled slowly, mist curling from his lips. His fingers, stiff from the cold, hovered above the trap. The wolf's breathing was ragged, its flanks shuddered with each breath. The eyes, wild, desperate, locked onto his. For a heartbeat, Walter felt the weight of every deer, elk, bear he had ever taken. With a grunt, he pressed down on the rusted mechanism. The trap sprang open with a sharp snap. The wolf whimpered, its leg bleeding where the steel teeth had bitten deep. Walter eased the animal free, wrapping his arms around it with a strength that surprised even him. 63 years old, and for the first time in a long time, Walter Jensen carried something besides regret. The walk back to the cabin was brutal. The snow came sideways, needling his face, blurring the world into white. Walter's boots sank deep, every step a battle. The wolf, draped over his shoulders, was little more than a sack of bones and damp fur. But it was alive. When Walter reached the cabin, he kicked the door shut behind him, lowering the wolf gently onto an old quilt by the fire. Blood seeped into the fabric, dark and stubborn. He rummaged through a dusty first aid kit, muttering under his breath, "You're a damn fool, Walter." He cleaned the wound as best he could, wincing each time the wolf jerked and growled. It took nearly an hour to wrap the leg in gauze torn from an old shirt. By the end, his hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from something harder to name. Outside, night fell like a curtain. Wind howled against the cabin walls, rattling the window panes. Inside, Walter sat in his worn-out chair, watching the wolf, watching its chest rise and fall, watching its eyelids flutter in restless dreams. Something shifted that night, small, imperceptible, like the first crack in a sheet of ice. Word of what Walter had done spread fast through the town the next morning. At the diner, over black coffee and plates of eggs, the locals whispered, "You hear about Jensen? Local 2, VO. Brought a wolf into his house. Must have finally lost it. Local 3, VO. That old man's gone soft." But Walter didn't care. For the first time in years, the empty rooms of his cabin didn't echo so loud. There was breath now. Life. On the second day, the wolf wouldn't eat. Walter set out a plate of venison scraps, but it barely lifted its head. Panic coiled tight in his chest. Not the sharp panic of a man in danger, but the slow, suffocating kind. The kind you feel when something fragile begins to slip away. He sat by the fire, head in his hands. Memories flooding in. A wife, long gone. A son, estranged. Hunting trips that had started as a way to feed the family and turned into something darker. An addiction to the chase, to the kill. And in that quiet, Walter Jensen realized what he was really trying to save. That night, as the wolf whimpered in its sleep, Walter stayed awake. He stroked its matted fur, whispered words he hadn't spoken aloud in years. "Hang in there, fella. Just hang in there." Outside, the snowstorm raged on, but inside that cabin, beneath the weight of years and regret, something raw and unexpected began to take root. Not every rescue is clean. Not every redemption is loud. Sometimes it's a man in a cabin, an injured wolf, and the long road back to being human. In small towns, word travels faster than the wind, and mercy can look a lot like madness. By the third day, Walter Jensen's cabin had become the quiet center of a gathering storm. He didn't need to visit town to know. The signs were all around him. The fresh boot prints in the snow near his property line, the faint rumble of trucks idling at the edge of the woods, the half-spoken warnings that drifted up from the valley like smoke. Inside the cabin, the wolf had begun to stir. It was eating now, carefully, cautiously. And though its leg remained bound in Walter's makeshift bandages, it tested its weight in small, trembling motions. Walter watched from across the room, arms crossed, his rough hands restless. Each time the wolf lifted its head, its yellow eyes flickering toward him, something tightened in Walter's chest. Not fear, not exactly. Something older. Older than hunting, older than instinct. Recognition. You and me, we're not so different, are we? Cut to the town diner. The bell over the door jingles. Men in flannel jackets sit hunched over coffee cups, murmuring in tight circles. Mary, the waitress, shakes her head as she refills a mug. He's lost his mind. Bringing a damn predator into his home? What if it gets loose? What if it comes down here? I'll go up there tomorrow. Talk to him. Make sure things don't get out of hand. Back at the cabin. The fire crackles low. Walter sharpens his old hunting knife, the scrape of metal on stone filling the room. The wolf lies near the hearth, its breathing even, calmer now. Walter Jensen had always known how to kill, learning how to heal. That was new. On the fourth day, the knock comes. It's Tom, broad-shouldered, weathered face, hat in his hands. Walter answers the door with a grunt. "Morning, Walt." "Tom, heard you've got yourself some company." "Walt, you know I can't just..." "Look, folks are worried. They're saying, maybe it's time you let us handle it." "Handle it? Yeah. Bring it in, or, you know, before someone gets hurt." "Ain't nobody getting hurt, Tom. Not if they stay off my land." "All right. But Walt, don't make me come back up here." Night falls. The wolf paces the cabin now, limping but determined. Walter watches it move, its body a tapestry of scars and survival. Something inside him stirs, something he's kept buried for decades. The memory of a boy, not yet hardened, not yet lost to the hunt. Flashback sequence. A younger Walter, no more than 12, following his father through these same woods. The snap of a rifle shot, the thud of a body hitting earth. His father's rough hand on his shoulder. "That's how it's done, boy. You want to be a man, you take what the world gives you. No room for softness out here." Outside, the unmistakable crunch of footsteps in the snow. More than one set. Exterior Walter's cabin. Three men stand just beyond the tree line, rifles slung over their shoulders, voices low. "He's not gonna listen. We can't wait for something to happen. Let's just take care of it." Redemption, it turns out, is never a quiet road. Walter steps outside, coat pulled tight, boots crunching into the snow. The men straighten as he approaches. "Evenin', Walt. Evenin', boys. Don't reckon you're up here for the scenery. Just making sure you're thinking straight. You've had your look. Now go on home." The moment stretches. Then, slowly, the men back away, muttering under their breath. Walter watches until their figures disappear into the dark. Inside the cabin, later that night, the wolf rests its head on Walter's boot. His hand moves almost without thought, stroking the coarse fur. A hunter learns to read signs, tracks in the snow, a shift in the wind, the weight of silence before the storm. But some signs, they come from within. For the first time in years, Walter Jensen dreams, not of the hunt, but of release, of letting go.
The town wakes to find the forest blanketed in fresh snow, and Walter wakes to find the wolf standing on shaky legs, gazing toward the trees. Their eyes meet. For a heartbeat, the world stills. "You're ready, aren't you?" With a slow, careful motion, he moves to the door, swinging it open wide. The wolf limps forward, pausing at the threshold. It looks back once, just once, and in that glance is everything Walter has been trying to find: forgiveness, freedom, a mirror of his own broken, mending heart. Not every cage has bars, not every prison has walls, and sometimes, setting something free is the only way to set yourself free. Walter stands in the doorway, watching as the wolf disappears into the trees, its silhouette swallowed by the white. The snow falls, the world turns quiet again. But in the heart of Montana, in a cabin once haunted by silence, a man stands lighter than he has in years, watching the tracks fade, feeling the shift in his chest where a hunter once lived, and where now, something gentler has taken root. There's a moment after loss when the world holds its breath. The space between the last goodbye and the first step forward. For Walter Jensen, that moment stretched like an endless Montana winter. The morning after the wolf disappeared into the trees, Walter sat alone on the cabin steps. His boots sank into the snow, his hands cradled a chipped mug of black coffee gone cold. The forest was silent, but to Walter, it roared. For decades, the woods had been his hunting ground, his refuge, his punishment, and now they were empty. Or maybe, for the first time, they were full of something he couldn't name. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned to ash. The quilt where the wolf had lain was folded neatly at the foot of the chair. Walter's fingers traced the worn fabric absently, his mind adrift. A man who spends his life taking can forget how to give. But the moment he remembers, it changes everything. That afternoon, Walter walked the perimeter of his land. His breath misted in the air. Each step broke the snow's fragile crust. He paused near the old oak at the edge of the clearing, the tree where he'd hung his first deer at 16. His father's voice echoed in memory. "Proud of you, son. Took you long enough to become a man." But now, staring at the empty space beneath the branches, Walter felt only a quiet ache. Not regret, not shame. Something simpler, more profound. A realization. Flashback. A younger Walter kneels beside a dying animal. His father's shadow looms. The boy hesitates, eyes wide with conflict. His father's voice: "Don't think, boy. You hesitate, you lose." Back in the present, Walter closed his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel what the boy in that memory could not: sorrow. He sank to his knees in the snow, head bowed, breath shaking. Grief is not just for the lives we've lost, but for the selves we abandoned along the way. There comes a time when the weight of our past becomes too heavy to carry. It's in these moments we must find the courage to lay down our burdens, to let go of the pain that no longer serves us. That night, Walter sat by the hearth, a bottle of whiskey on the table, the radio murmuring old country songs through the static. He turned the dial absently, landing on a weather report. Temperatures dropping tonight, heavy snowfall expected across the Bitterroot Valley. His gaze drifted to the rifle mounted above the mantel. For years it had been an extension of his arm, his identity, but now it seemed strange, out of place. With a heavy exhale, Walter rose, reached for the rifle, and carried it outside. The moon hung low, casting silver across the snow. Walter trudged through the drifts to the edge of the woods. The trees loomed, silent witnesses. He knelt by the old oak, dug into the frozen earth with his bare hands. The cold bit his skin, but he welcomed it. The sting, the bite of consequence. Finally, he laid the rifle down, covering it with earth and snow, pressing his palm flat against the mound. Some burdens we lay down not because they're heavy, but because we're finally ready to walk without them. Inside the cabin, Walter collapsed into the old armchair, exhaustion pulling him under. He dreamed, vivid, aching dreams. Dream sequence. He walks through the woods, younger, stronger. The wolf appears ahead, limping but not in pain. It pauses, watching him, then turns and leads him deeper among the trees. They walk together through snow and shadow, past memories frozen in time. His wife's laughter, his son's first steps, his own face reflected in still water. Finally, they reach a clearing bathed in light. The wolf turns, touches its nose to Walter's hand and fades into the mist. Walter is left standing alone, but lighter somehow. Morning. Walter wakes to sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest is gone. He moves through the cabin, opening shutters, letting the light in. Dust motes swirl in the beams, tiny galaxies turning in the air. He tidies the room, folds blankets, sweeps the hearth, sets a kettle to boil. Simple things, but each feels like a prayer. Cut to the town diner. The locals speak in murmurs. Local 1, Vio. He hasn't been to town in weeks. Local 2, Vio. Reckon he's okay? Local 3, Vio. Maybe he finally packed up and left. Exterior, Walter's cabin, afternoon. A life he never expected. Walter stands on the porch, watching the tree line. A breeze stirs the branches, carrying the faintest sound. A howl, distant but unmistakable. His lips curve into the barest hint of a smile. Somehow, we are all wild things, learning how to heal. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is to let go. Walter turns, stepping back into the warmth of the cabin, leaving the door open just a crack, as if perhaps he's expecting a visitor. When the storm passes and the snow melts, what's left behind is not the wreckage but the shape of things revealed beneath. For Walter Jensen, what emerged that spring was a life he had never expected to live. The last of the snow retreats in wet rivulets down the hillside. Patches of green pierce the thawing ground. The air is sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth. Walter stands at the edge of the clearing, his silhouette outlined against a soft gray sky. His shoulders, once hunched with the weight of decades, seem straighter now. His hands, once always curled in tension, hang loosely at his sides. He watches the tree line where the memory of the wolf lingers like breath on cold glass. Inside, the cabin has transformed. The walls, once crowded with trophies of conquest, now hold something gentler. A carved wooden wolf on the mantel, a photograph of a younger Walter with his wife and son, dusted off and set in a place of honor. The old hunting rifle remains buried beneath the oak, where Walter laid it to rest months before. The world outside hadn't changed. The mountains still rose in solemn silence, the woods still echoed with the cries of predator and prey. But Walter Jensen had. At the diner, the townsfolk no longer whisper about the old hunter on the mountain. They speak of him with quiet respect. He's different now, doesn't come to town much, but when he does, he smiles more. He even fixed up that old cabin. Hell, I heard he's planting a garden. Sometimes it just takes one wild thing to show a man how to come home. His hands dig into the soil, not for the hunt, not for survival, but to nurture. He plants seedlings, presses earth around fragile stems. Each movement is careful, deliberate, as if he's memorizing the shape of gentleness. In the evenings, he sits on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the peaks. Sometimes, when the wind is right, he hears it. A faint, distant howl, rolling down from the ridges like a blessing. And every time, his lips lift in a quiet smile. Flashback montage, poetic and dreamlike. Walter as a young man, gun raised, hesitating. Walter with his wife, laughing in a sunlit field. Walter holding his newborn son, wonder in his eyes. Walter alone in the woods, years later, weathered and haunted. The moment his hands unclasped the steel trap, the wolf's breath brushing his skin, the wolf's yellow eyes, neither wild nor tame, locking onto his, the snow closing behind the wolf's retreating figure. We are all in some way creatures of habit, but when habit becomes a cage, it is mercy that sets us free. Walter at the town church, Easter morning. He slips in quietly, sitting at the back. His son, now a grown man, turns, surprised to see him. A moment's hesitation, and then a small, tentative smile. Walter inclines his head, a silent acknowledgement. No grand gestures, just the quiet mending of something frayed. He hikes slowly, leaning on a walking stick. The forest, once a place of conquest, now feels like home. He pauses at a ridge overlooking the valley, the breeze lifting his silver hair. A flash of movement in the trees draws his eye. For a heartbeat, the world sharpens. There, a gray figure slipping through the undergrowth. Not the same wolf, perhaps. Or perhaps it is. In that instant, it doesn't matter. Walter closes his eyes, draws a long, steadying breath. Some stories don't end with a roar, or a gunshot, or even a parting word. Some end the way they began, with the soft crunch of snow beneath a hunter's boot, the rise and fall of breath between two beating hearts, and the quiet, enduring miracle of mercy. What would you do standing at the edge of your own wilderness? Would you choose the familiar road, or take the first trembling step toward change? Have you ever experienced a moment that changed the course of your life? Share your story in the comments below, and if this story moved you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more journeys of quiet courage, redemption, and hope.